Hello and welcome to Streetwise Economics. On this episode, we actually have a very special guest, Isatou Barry. She is an analyst in the semiconductor sector. She is currently based in Portland, Oregon, in the United States of America. She grew up in the Gambia, immigrated to the US to pursue education. She did an undergraduate degree in finance and economics, and also now she's doing her graduate studies also in the same field. Now, over the past couple of years, she's worked in the non-profit sector before she found her love in the semiconductor industry. In this conversation, we are going to share some insights, her personal experience immigrating to the US, her lessons on personal finance and investing, and also some career insights. I hope you will enjoy and love this podcast. But also, don't forget to subscribe so that this podcast can reach far and wide. May the markets be with you, and I hope you enjoy this lovely conversation. Have a good time. Thank you. Hello and welcome to the podcast, Isatou Barry. I am so excited to have you on the podcast. Welcome.
Hi, Isaac. It's good to see you.
Fantastic.
Welcome.
So why don't you tell us, a little bit about your story, like who is Isatou Barry?
My name is Isatou Barry. I am originally from the Gambia, which is a very small country in the west of Africa. I grew up in Gambia, grew up in an entrepreneurial family. Back
Yes.
home, most of our families have small businesses and
Yes.
that's how they live life.
Mhm.
I went to high school out there, and then when I graduated, I moved to the US to
Yes.
for school. So I've been here since then.
Wonderful.
Mhm.
And I understand right now you are currently working in the semiconductor sector, which is a very interesting space because most people are talking about NVIDIA, SMCI, this artificial intelligence boom, so to say. Uh, do you care to tell us a little bit more about, your insights? This is, of course, just personal insights. It's not like investment advice.
Yeah,
What do you see in the sector? Can you tell us?
absolutely. I'm still new to this industry. I'm still learning. It's a very complex industry in terms of
Yes,
like operationally and all the technicalities of this industry.
yes,
But I work as an analyst on I work for a local semiconductor company here in
yes,
Portland as an
yes,
analyst. And one of the things I know about this industry is that it's a very interesting industry. Every day I work at a company where like you can hear the future of the technologies that we're building, how interesting these things are, how these
yes,
things shape our lives, how they
yes,
improve our everyday lives. So, one thing I will say is, just from a general standpoint, this
yes,
industry continues to grow.
mm,
I know it's very exciting
yes,
working in that space.
yes,
And working for a company that's really exciting, but also from, an investor standpoint,
yes,
just seeing, just how all the technological advancements that are going to
yes,
go, there's going to be semiconductors are going to benefit from that continuous innovation, right?
yes,
And this adaptation to new technologies that we're all taking on. And
yes,
just, the conversations around AI and just all the
yes,
technologies around it is an area that will grow. The conversation around the Internet of Things, where it has led to more devices being connected to the internet, right? Where
yes,
so all these things is where the semiconductor plays. So I think it's an interesting industry. To
mhm,
understand it might be complex because even the
yes,
market trends of it are very interesting.
yes.
Yeah. So I'm
That's
still learning. I try to follow the news. I try to see what's happening.
Yes, and you're actually at the center of actually, participating, operationally and also as an analyst. And you do have a very interesting background. You studied economics and business, and you're currently studying for a master's degree in finance.
Mhm.
Do you want to tell us a little bit more about that? Like, what are you currently studying?
Yeah. My undergrad was in finance and economics,
Yes,
and currently I'm doing a master's in finance.
yes,
So really, for me, talking about the background of coming from, a family of entrepreneurs, I've
Yes.
always, I remember growing up as a child, helping my mom in her small business, helping her to balance the books,
Yes.
we didn't call it that back then, but, but really that was what created this passion and interest in trying to understand how, economics work, but also like from a financial perspective. And
Yes.
so when I came to the US, I didn't know what I wanted to study, economics or finance. So I did a combination of both. But my program was mainly finance with just a minor in economics.
Which
Yeah.
university did you do your
I went to
undergraduate and yeah,
Portland State University.
yeah. And for your master's again, which
My program is still there. It's we're great school in Portland, Oregon.
fantastic. I was in
Mhm.
Portland, as you know, I think it was in February, and
Yeah,
it's a very beautiful city
it's a
that is in
beautiful city.
Oregon.
Yeah.
And a lot of people say, I know programs in the US, graduate programs, they cost maybe not of 100,000 US dollars. Do you care to share some financing or a scholarship or maybe
Mm-hmm.
um, ways which maybe someone who is in Asia or in other part of the world
Mm-hmm.
or maybe in Canada who wants to study in the US, what are the other potential sources of funding, of course, other than, funding it from their own pocket?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Education is definitely expensive,
Yes.
especially for people, who come here as international students. One thing I like to say is I see education as an investment on yourself.
Yes.
It's like you're taking a bet on yourself, you're investing on yourself. And sometimes the returns, the ROI can be high,
Yes.
once you attain that excellence, that academic
Yes.
excellence. So, one thing I will advise people definitely when I was in school,
Hmm.
in undergrad especially, I really try to make good use of like scholarships, applying to as many as I can, which
Yes.
takes a lot of work. You might apply to 100 scholarships and you might just get
Yes.
10%,
Yes.
of that
Still
as a
good.
positive yes, but it's still good. The goal is to save as much money as you can. So if you can get scholarships to help you,
Yes.
um, go to school. But most of the times it's gonna require you to have to, do that investment on yourself. And I think among all the investments, I think that's one great investment that you can do on yourself.
Yeah, personal development. I definitely
Mhm.
agree. And usually I even now I take some, online courses, especially I'm
Mhm.
interested in investing in finance.
Okay.
And it's amazing how little I know, right? Even in this
Hmm.
sector. So, thank you so much for sharing that. Now, this is not going to be like to be taken as investment advice. It's
Hmm.
Isatou and I just having, sharing our experiences. Do you care to share a little bit more about personal finance and investing? Do you have any experiences like investing in the stock market or maybe, business, whatever you think of?
Yeah. First I want to speak from the perspective of an immigrant that came here, right? Because I
Yes.
know a lot of our audience here are some of them are immigrants, right? I
Yes.
know when I moved here, coming from high school, moving to the US, back home we don't talk a lot about like personal finance.
Stable
We don't talk a lot
for the most
about
part.
credit history, right? Credit
Mhm.
score, all those things. I think when I think of my mom, she had never been to business school, but I think
Yeah,
she did a good job of managing her financial statements.
definitely.
She still reminds me today that she has always made profit, even though
Yes.
she doesn't have an accounting degree. So I believe in her process, right? But
Yes.
when I first moved here, I think one of the things I didn't know is about getting a credit card,
Hmm.
which is very important in the West, right?
Yes.
How it determines a lot about your future here is
Yes.
something a lot of people don't know, and a lot of immigrants and friends sometimes don't know the importance of that.
Yes.
So, one of the first things I want to tell people is like, when you move here, get a credit card. My
Yes.
first credit card was $150,
Mm.
at my community credit union. That was not a
Yes.
lot, but I used it to do like groceries, and then
Yes.
every month I will pay off, which
Yes.
in some way was good that it was 150 because that means I
Yes.
didn't overspend more than I could
Yes.
afford, right?
Yes.
Um, so that's one thing I will say. And then the most important thing before we even talk about investing also is like learning to budget,
Yes.
understanding what's a budget, right? Because
Yes.
a lot of us, including myself at some point early on,
Yes.
let's say you earn $200 a month.
Yes.
Your expenses 250.
Yes.
That means you're having a loss, right?
Yeah,
So
deficit.
yeah, you're having a deficit. So really, some changes that happened for me was when I went on a Excel spreadsheet,
Mm-hmm.
put in all the numbers, what's my income, what's my expenses, what's my expense, and what's left. Because
Yes.
what that does is it does two things for you. It allows you to know what area do you need to cut off on, right?
Yes.
Because you see what the balance is at the end of the day,
Yes.
and what area do you have more left on that you can now invest.
Yes.
And most of the times, if you don't have that visual,
Yes.
you don't know because these things are on our phones, right? So you're just swiping and just paying things, right? So it's a convenience, but also sometimes it can make you not track your plan, your financial future.
Mm-hmm.
So understanding that budget, creating that budget, understanding how that works,
Mm-hmm.
um, you know, you definitely don't have to live your whole life in a spreadsheet, but
Yes,
try
of
to get
course.
used to understanding what that happens. And then after that, I think it's really, saving for retirement, especially if you have a job, most
Yes,
jobs have this thing where like they will match your 401k contributions, you
that is in the US.
at a certain percentage, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's awesome because that's free money that you're
Yes,
getting, right?
yes,
But even if you don't have a job, it comes to the investment, right?
yes,
Trying to understand the investment market. And it's
yes.
not an easy thing to understand. Even as
Mm.
somebody with a finance degree, I'm not anywhere close to being an expert yet, right?
Yes,
But really, trying to see the trends in the market, right? Trying to
yes,
understand like what stocks are interesting, like
yes,
I remember in one of my classes, one of my professors simply
yes,
explaining it as trying to see what are some things that you think we will always need, right? So if you
yes.
think about that, that thing will grow, right? Because, there is a need there. People will always want to get that.
Did you know that only 6% of the people who watch this channel are subscribed? So I highly encourage you to please subscribe on this podcast so that we can grow and have this content reach far and wide. As you know, on this channel on Streetwise Economics, there are two parts of the content. Number one, I bring in regular updates on what is happening in the stock markets and broadly on the capital markets, that is in the US, in Canada, and globally. I regularly do so by recording videos so that you have access to the information and also my experiences as a retail investor and also as a trader. I do so regularly. Now, on the second part of the podcast, I invite people from different parts of the world, from different walks of life, and also who have different experience to share their experiences with money, personal finance, investing, and also career insight. The goal is to share these experiences so that we can learn from each other. So don't forget to comment and, as I said, subscribe so that we can all learn from each other and build wealth together. I hope you enjoy this episode. Thank you so much and have a wonderful day, and may the markets be with you.
You want to share something that you think we always need, just as an
I
example?
mean, I don't want to say a
It's
certain
not
company.
investment
Yeah, I don't
advice,
want to I don't
sure.
want to give a
Yes,
certain
for
company as
sure.
an example, but I
In
think
general
about
terms.
sometimes like I know, for example, Costco. At some point, Costco
Yes,
was doing very well, right? When
yes,
you think about Costco. So things like that, and like, the tech industry, like
we need
companies
food.
like that. Yeah, you need food, right? When you think about technology, right now, sometimes the markets are not, good, especially the semiconductor industry. Some of our, some companies have seen, their financial statements really go down. But think
Yes,
of the long run. So that's also the thing
yes,
when you invest, you have to, which is hard because I know
yes.
when I started investing, my thing is I wanted to be able to take out my money next month, right? And you
Yes,
and I have had these conversations.
for sure.
It's really about the long term, thinking about that,
Yes.
right? Having a long term plan and
Mm-hmm.
being comfortable with that. Sometimes when you look at your investment
Portfolio.
app, it's negative
It's
numbers.
negative.
It's okay, right? And some days it's positive.
Yes,
So really, what I'm trying to say is I think it's three things, right?
yes,
Trying to understand your budget. That's the first most important thing. It's very basic, but it's very important.
yes.
Number two, trying to understand what are your goals for your life, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
my goals for financial independence might be different from yours.
Yes,
So not trying to follow a trend of what somebody's doing. You might want to invest in this. This might be your goal. Maybe
yes,
that's not my goal. What is my goal?
Yes.
And then third, working towards that goal and
Yes.
educating yourself on what you need to do to get there. That is the strategy that I've taken.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And, I couldn't have put it in any better way than you did, because I think you would be surprised by the number of people who don't even track their expenses. When I have
Mm-hmm.
conversations with friends, I myself, I remember at some point I was even scared to look at my account, right? Because I was scared, like, oh, maybe I'm overspending. But then once I
Mm-hmm.
got the courage to actually track things, and not necessarily that I would like be fixated on the Excel spreadsheet, but it's just a tool to see, the money that is coming in, the money that is coming out, if money that comes from different, income streams. And also the credit system. Let's say at some point you now want to get into a mortgage. It is something that is very important, because the
Mm-hmm.
credit report is something that is very crucial, because the lenders would say, oh, are you someone who is trustworthy? Because we want
Mm-hmm.
to lend you maybe 500,000. So you
Mm-hmm.
can't just, lend out that money to someone who has no history of,
Mm-hmm.
being able to pay back that money. Otherwise, it would be a non-performing loan. And,
Yeah.
so that's very interesting. So, having said that, do you have any mistakes that you have made that you want to share, like, with the audience? Because sometimes I think there's always this narrative that, things are not perfect. For myself, at some
Yeah.
point, I had, I didn't understand how the credit cards work, and
Mm-hmm.
sometimes, interest is 20%. Fortunately, it was not a big amount. I paid it off, and I started being very conservative and learning from that experience.
Yeah. I did high 700s
Yeah.
to low 600s just
Yes.
because I missed a $50 payment
Yes.
for 3 months.
Yes.
When I could pay it, I just was like,
Forgot.
oh, I was just being lazy of paying it,
Yes.
right? And then the issue there is it's not about it coming down. The
Yeah.
struggle of taking it back up,
Oh,
it's
yes.
harder. It's very easy for it to come down, right? So think of
Yes.
it, if during that 2 years, I was thinking of getting a car or getting anything that required me to
Yes.
get a loan from a bank, my
Yes.
interest rate was going to be very high
Yes.
because of just that $50 that I didn't pay for 3 months.
The impact
So
is huge.
the impact is huge, and correcting the impact is it's
Yeah.
I don't know. That's a whole lot of conversations I think credit bureaus need to work on. But
Yeah,
yeah.
and just to add on that, now think of it like, because when you are taking loans, maybe for a mortgage, you're talking of
Mhm.
500, 600,000.
Mhm.
So even if it's a basis point, maybe 0.25%,
Mhm.
it's a lot of money when you
It is a
then,
lot.
look at it in absolute terms. So that's
Yeah.
that's a very, yeah, good lesson from there. For me, what I
Yeah.
do is each time that I make a purchase, I just pay it right away, right?
Yeah.
Before I forget. And some people, they just automate, which is another way of going about
Mhm.
it. I'm curious as well, is that what's your views on debt? Like, for example,
Yeah.
getting into a mortgage or borrowing money, depending on, of course, on what you are
Mhm.
using the money for. Do you
Yeah.
think it's a
And
good?
thanks for your comment on the automation. That's what I did now. I automate all my credit cards and it's been
Yes.
awesome. Um, in terms of debt is very interesting
Yes.
because something about money,
Yes.
more than the technicalities of it, it's also the psychology, right, of money.
Yes.
And my psychology of money, where I came from, is debt is bad. We don't take debt.
It
My
is
mom
for the
never,
most part.
my parents never encouraged that. It's like you work, you earn, you use what you earn, and that was
Yes.
noble. That was great. That's
Yes.
excellence. So changing my perspective about debt, I think took a long time, to be honest.
Wow.
And it took a long time. It took, studying in
Yes.
school, understanding,
The
there's good debt
behavior
and
as
there's
well.
bad debt, right? And
Yes.
like sometimes the returns that debt can bring for you.
Yes.
So, I think my opinion about debt now is like when you're taking a debt, make sure it's being used in something that's going to bring a high return on that investment.
Hmm.
You know, there are some things I think you take a debt on, you get maybe it's a need, you
Yes.
really can't I think of like cars, for example, right?
Yeah.
Cars are something that we take a debt and buy. It's a need though, because we need cars
Yes.
to get to work and we
Yes.
need work to earn money, right?
Yes.
So some people use cars to be able to, take their families from one location to another. So it's
Yeah.
it's really something that you can't live without, right? But
Yes.
then you might argue, well, I'm using that car to get a job that pays me. That's
Yes.
true,
Yes.
So I think it's really just understanding what's a good debt and a bad debt. You might take a debt to go to school.
Yes.
That might be a good debt because the return on that investment once you're at the end line
Yes.
might be higher.
Yes.
So these are
Yeah.
just like general statements, but it's
Yeah.
the point of it is really when I think of taking a debt, I think of what's the goal?
Yes. What's
Is it
the
a
potential
need?
return
Is it
on
a need?
investment?
Is it a need? Is it a want, right?
Yes.
And what's the return on this investment? I absolutely think we shouldn't take debt for once.
Yes.
I think that is one of the biggest financial mistakes you can ever make is taking a debt to finance some things that are just wants. That's my personal opinion.
And I was actually in Washington, D.C. when the market was, dropped and
Okay.
people the reason being that some hedge fund managers and investors were borrowing money in yen, which was
Mm-hmm.
very cheap. And when
Mm-hmm.
the Japanese central bank increased, I think the short-term rates, interest rates, those people who were borrowing that money in yen and converting it in the US and buying treasury bills and other
Mm-hmm.
US or other, securities dominated in other currencies and making profit, it
Mm-hmm.
collapsed. That's
Mm-hmm.
the problem with debt is that it's
Yeah,
good as long as everything is going on your side. But if
that's
it
true.
goes the other way, for example, a lot of people they use margin. For example, margin for those who don't know, in Canada here we have, different registered accounts. For example, tax-free savings account. So what
Mm-hmm.
happens is, let's say I have stocks or securities that are worth maybe 50,000. I can
Mm-hmm.
probably get leverage. That means a loan in the margin account, maybe for three times, maybe that's 150,000, right?
Oh, okay.
uh, and sometimes maybe even less, just as an example. So what it means is that if the securities in the uh, account that you're using as collateral drops, right? Then it means you have a margin call. Basically, the broker would call you and say, "Hey, if you don't liquidate this portfolio by this time, we
Mm-hmm.
will they will just execute, right?" And
Oh,
what
wow.
usually happens is at the bottom. That's how a lot of people lose money. I remember this
Mm-hmm.
story by Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger. They said there were a trio. There was the other guy who was super smart, just like those guys. May soul rest in peace, Charlie Munger. He, one of the guy actually, ended up going broke because he was using leverage. Because what happens is the market can drop anytime without
Right.
any prior warning. So when that
Mm-hmm.
happens, you forced to liquidate at the bottom, but you still owe that money to the lender. So for
Mm-hmm.
me, I prefer rather a slow. If I get 10%, 12%
Mm-hmm.
per year, that's fine with me. And then I have control over my life when I will buy
Yeah.
or sell those
Mm-hmm.
securities. So, but for some
Absolutely.
people, they say very few people can afford to buy a house, let's say for 500,
For
600,000.
cash, yeah.
Yes, right? But then I always tell people if you want to get into real estate, run the numbers. No,
Mm-hmm.
there are a lot of calculators online, like which
Mm-hmm.
can compare renting versus buying, or even if you want to
Mm-hmm.
spice it up, you can consider even investing by just looking at the average return for the S&P 500 over the
Mm-hmm.
past. Yes, since 1923, there's the
Absolutely.
data, right? But
Mm-hmm.
sometimes, the future is not necessarily determined by what happened in the past. So there are caveats there.
Yeah.
So I agree with you, and I'm very careful when it comes to debt, honestly,
Mm-hmm.
because I just don't want to be buried alive with the debt.
Yeah.
Generally, from my experience talking to people, it's like people like to complain. Some people, not everyone.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody has got something going on. That's why I
Yeah.
like to be kind with people because you don't
Mm-hmm.
know what the other person is going through.
Absolutely. I think it's been strategic, right? People
Yeah.
gotta be strategic. And again, like what is the person's financial goals? I think as a
Yes.
society, sometimes we define our own financial goals based on what
Yes.
someone else's financial goals. Or it's like define that for yourself and go by that, but be strategic and only take debt, I think, if the returns are,
Yes.
do the numbers, like you said, do it,
Run the numbers. And you
Yeah,
mentioned another thing. Some people, they get a loan, buy a car, and then they do Uber, they deliver stuff. That's a business operation. So you are
right.
borrowing to use it for something that is
Yeah.
productive. The
Mm-hmm.
problem comes, let's say, if you lose your job, if
Mm-hmm.
something unexpected happens and you don't have an emergency fund, that's the issue there. But you see that probably one of the difference, the reason why maybe other developing countries, maybe outside of South Africa, that is a good credit system in Africa, you
Mm-hmm.
realize that in the West, there's leverage. Basically, you can
Mm-hmm.
amplify, but it comes with risks, right? You find
Yes.
that there's access to credit is very limited. Anyways,
Mm-hmm.
you are an analyst in the semiconductor industry. Do you want to share with us what has been your experience? And if you don't mind, if someone who is in any part of the world may want to be in that space, what are your career
Yeah.
experiences?
So my role right now, so I had worked in, semiconductor company before in
Mhm.
finance
Yes,
as a financial analyst, so more like the corporate finance side of things, right?
yes.
And now I work under a team that's called the Global Inventory Team. So
Okay.
as an analyst in for our inventory controls internally as
Yes,
a company, what
yes,
controls we have around inventory.
yes,
And, in terms of like how to get into that space,
yes,
when I graduated, to be honest, from school, I
yes,
didn't know what industry I was gonna get into, right? I
yes,
knew I wanted to do corporate finance. I was not interested in the investment side of things. So
yes.
corporate finance was where I wanted to go.
Mhm.
I just got an opportunity that the first job I got out of school, an internship was in that industry.
Mhm.
And, that became the next steps. And, this current company that I work for, this is my second time going back there. And
Yes,
really what brought me back, yeah, the industry is interesting, but it was really like the company culture, right?
yes.
So one thing I tell people is, think of what you're good at, like what spaces do you think you're gonna be good at, right? So
Mm.
for me, I knew investment was not what I want to do, right?
Yes,
I could be good at it if I wanted to, if I
yes,
had interest in it, right?
yes.
So think of like what do you want to do, and then find companies that align with that, right? So if you wanted to
Mhm.
work in an industry that's innovative, that's all that's find companies that are that. If you wanted to work in the food industry, the good thing with corporate finance, it is transferable
Yes,
across all industries, right? And
yes,
things around controls and analysis, that's
yes.
transferable. So, just know what you want to do. And then, when you find a place that's good, that aligns with your values, that aligns with what you want for your career growth, stay and try to do good and try to learn and try to grow and try to add value as
Mhm.
much as you can. So, I want to say that and also add, I am not an expert in that industry. And
Mhm.
you don't have to be an expert, but
You
most of
have
the times you're
experience, lived experience.
experience, but most of the times you're surrounded by some really cool, smart people who are
Yes.
willing to teach and mentor and coach. So, and that is very important, especially early on in your career. Um, I think that is the most helpful thing early on in your career is being within a company, a culture that helps you grow
Yes.
and allows you to add value. So I would
Uh,
say be open-minded, for somebody
yes.
that's early on in their career, be open-minded until you find that place for yourself.
Something that is fantastic. You have a very interesting background also in that regard. You are also going to school by the night. I mentioned it.
Mhm.
Some people they complain. So tell me how you balance these things. You are working full time at
Yeah.
night. You are going to school. You are learning about these cool things,
Yeah.
investing, bonds, and all these
Mhm.
other things. How do you balance that? And
It's,
also
I will
family.
say it's hard. It's
Yes.
really hard, but I'm that person. I like to be very busy.
Yes.
I will say I just wrapped up my first year, and I
Yeah.
think the first 6 months, it was bad because I had sort of zero social life. And
Wow.
I love my social life. I have friends. I love to spend time. I love to be intentional with the people I'm spending
Yes.
time with, my friends and community.
Yes.
So the first 6 months was really hard. But
Yeah. I
now
can
I finished my
imagine.
first year. And I think the second year is going to be easier because then you're just doing classes that you've already learned about.
Yes.
But I think the thing is, I have a mentor, and
Yeah.
my current manager at work also teaches me this, where
Yeah.
they have this perspective when they're at work, they're at work,
Yes.
So really balancing your life that way. If you're at work, you're at work. If you're at school, you're at school. If
Having
you're on
fun.
vacation, you're on vacation, right? So be the best, be good at whatever you're doing,
Yeah.
and give it your time. And these two women that I talk about, my mentor and my manager, they've shown
Yes.
that way you
Yes.
can it's not going to be stressful because you are
Yes.
present in the thing that you're present at
Yes.
that current time.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
I also realize that sometimes, there's always something that is, gonna come up, but you have to prioritize what is more important to you.
Yeah.
Is it
Mhm.
education? And I've also seen that sometimes, generally from my experience talking to people, it's like people like to complain. Some people, not everyone. Everybody has got something going on. That's why I
Yeah.
like to be kind with people because you don't
Hmm.
know what the other person is going through.
Absolutely.
But choose the things that matter to you.
Yeah.
If spending time with family is important, if education, if work, because you want to, pay bills, right?
Hmm.
So that's very, very interesting.
Yeah.
Now,
And finding the balance, finding the balance between all of them.
fantastic.
Hmm.
And I know, in every situation there are challenges. I immigrated to Canada, as you know, and you immigrated from the Gambia to the US. Has it been all smooth and rosy? Can you share with us what has been their experiences like? Did you have any challenges in that regard?
Yeah, I think there's always challenges of moving to a country, especially when you're young and you have no family. So
Yes.
I'm the first, to in my family to leave home and come to the US and
Yes.
go to school. So there's talk about the cultural change, the
Yes.
shift from growing up in a community with so
Yes.
much love and people who knew you, who saw you grow up.
Yes.
People, you walk down the streets, people know your name, they know your family,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Coming to a place where people don't even know how to pronounce your name in the first
Yes.
place.
Oh
You
my
have to teach
gosh.
people, right?
Yes.
So, and that cultural shift is something I thought it gets better as you stay here longer. It
Yes.
doesn't. You just learn to know how to leave it, that this is your new reality, but
Yes.
the cultural and emotional part of being away from home is real. But,
Yes.
also like adapting and navigating the academic world here, especially being a first generation student,
Yes.
having to navigate between choosing programs and
Yes.
a career, and that was very hard. But
Mm.
I was fortunate to have great mentors here,
Mhm.
people who didn't look like me, speak like me, who
Yeah.
had different backgrounds, right?
Yes.
But these people, and people that look like me too, but these people, brought me up, helped me to find the right path. And, so it's been hard, but because of the goodness of people I've met here,
Yes.
it's made the journey easier. And yeah, so yeah.
I definitely understand and have had the same experiences. And you talk
Mhm,
about mentorship. How important is mentorship, in your
mhm.
journey, like career
Oh
or
God,
even in life in
mentorship is
general?
everything. Mentorship is everything, to be honest. It's
Yes.
it's it's changed
Yeah.
my life in many ways. And I have different mentors, right? I remember when I first came, I
Yes.
volunteered for a nonprofit here in
Yes.
Oregon, a nonprofit that served newly arrived
Yes.
African immigrant and refugee families. And I met my first two mentors there, These were men who came to the US sort of around the same age I came, who were
Yes.
now probably the same age as my dad then, right? So
Yes.
these people could easily relate to what I was going through and
Yes.
what my goals were, what my fears are, right? So that actually was the first foundation to helping set me for where I wanted to go. And the community here, seeing people who came like us and what they've
Yes.
built and the path
Yes.
they took, right? And calling these people for something simple as, hey,
Yes.
I am about to apply for this. What do you think? And they tell you how to
Yes.
do it, right?
Yes.
And then in my career, having mentors who are like, I think have different
Experienced.
mentors too. There's
Yes.
career mentors, there's personal mentors, right?
Mm.
People who can help you in both aspects of your life. And the mentors that I have that I have now, I'm very grateful because that has helped shape a lot of where I am. Yeah.
As we wrap up, I'm going to ask you this question, if you allow me. There might be a girl somewhere, be it in Africa, in Canada, or any part of the world, you are an inspiration. What is it that, has helped you to accomplish? If maybe you know it, maybe to one or two things, what is it that has been giving you this drive to
Yeah.
accomplish, to leave home, the Gambia, to, cross the oceans, to come to the US? What is it
Yeah.
that drives you?
Thank you for asking that question. And I think two things for me, right? One of the first things is really, and no matter where you come from, whether it's the US, whether it's Canada, whether it's Africa or Europe,
Yes.
knowing where you're from and
Yes.
who you're from, right? So
Hmm.
I grew up, like I talked about,
Yeah. Powerful.
a great family, but especially my mom, right? She was an entrepreneur. She was a woman that had never gone to school.
Hmm.
But for some reason, she believed so much in the power of education. And I don't know where she got that from, right? For somebody that has never been to school. And she really pushed us to be that. So
Yes.
when I came to the US, if there was a day when I'm tired of going to class,
Yeah.
or I was like, I'm gonna get an F or a D or a C in this class, I tried to work extra hard because I thought of women like my mom who never went to school, but who invested so much for
Mm.
their daughters to attain higher academic excellence. And I think about those goals that you're asking, what about that girl back home who doesn't have the opportunity that I have? So that actually pushed me every day. It pushed me to wake up for that Saturday class.
Hmm.
It pushed me to go to class after work. It pushed me to attend that 7 a.m. class because I was thinking of those stories of my mom and all the other girls, that
Yes.
didn't have this opportunity. And number two, the last one is really, it's not going to be easy, right? For
Yes.
people that look like us, for people
Yes.
with backgrounds like us, especially when you're abroad, it's not easy, right? But
Yes.
find grace in the good times, in the wins, right? So
Yes.
in the little, and I'm saying this, but it's something I'm learning too, right? It's
Yes.
not going to be easy, but just do it and try to find a community of people that are going to support you in that journey.
Hmm.
And you will learn people are very willing to
Yes.
help uplift and support and help show you the path. So just know where you're from, what
Yeah.
drives you. Very important to know what drives you
Yes.
actually. Because the
Yes.
moment you lose the drive of why you're doing this,
Yes.
you give up because you don't have a why,
Yes.
So that's what I will say.
This is powerful. And when you were narrating, my mom, just like your mom, she believed in me. She believed in education. Also, my dad was instrumental and supportive in his own way. But I would say, they just believed in us. So I
Yeah.
also didn't want to let it down. So thank you so much for this
Yeah.
opportunity. Is there anything in conclusion that you want to share with the audience? Of course, I'm very gracious of your time here.
Yeah. No, thank you. It's like it's always, you're such an inspiration as well
Thank
in
you.
what you're doing in your story, but also in your vision.
Thank you.
People like you are what makes, you know, it's when we see people like you together in the community, it helps
Yes.
inspire because you're doing a very important work because what you're doing about finance, teaching people about investing,
Mhm.
is something that can change lives and generations, actually. Think about you and I, our lives right now,
Yes.
the knowledge we have, and our
Yes.
kids' life. It's going to be a little
Yes.
different, right?
Very
Because
much
of
so.
this. Yeah. So
Yes.
the work you're doing is important. And thank you for having me on this podcast. Happy to have this conversation with you.
I appreciate that. And thank you
Yeah.
again for the privilege of your time. And the viewers, thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed this conversation and may the markets be with you. I wanted to give a special shout out to you for tuning in to this channel. I also want to especially ask you to subscribe and comment and also share this video so that it can go far and wide. And on this channel, you will find more content on personal finance, investing, and the podcast that I talk about experiences from people in different sectors. Now, if you want to learn more about
what I talk about, please make sure you can check out some other videos, and you can also reach out to me on www.streetwiseeconomics.com so that we can have a conversation. Have a wonderful time, and may the markets be on your side. Thank you again.